Hello YouTube. This is front strut replacement on a 2005 Kia Sedona EX. I'm sure there's several other models and years on either side of this van that this process will apply to. I already have the van jacked up and safely supported on all four jack stands. You can see the one for the passenger side rear as well. I'm working on the driver's side front brake and strut assembly right now. So of course I've also already removed the wheel. If you do not have an impact gun, make sure that you loosen the lug nuts prior to jacking up the vehicle. Otherwise you'll have a very hard time attempting to do it and or have to take it back down off of the jacks and start all over. But I have a nice little impact gun that I use to remove the wheel, set it over to the side. This is actually going to be a lot easier than I thought it would be. This is a strut unit that we're replacing. These two bolts that attach onto this stabilizer arm will be removed, and on the back side here there is a little clip for your brake hose that needs to come off, and it's just a simple pull. There's a little groove that it sets in, so just kind of set that off to the side so that when you go to remove the strut it won't get caught up in your way. And then there's only 4 more bolts, and they're really easily accessible. I've seen other cars, especially in the Kia lineup, where it's tucked up underneath this dash here and it's really hard to get to. You're removing wiper arms and all kinds of other different trim pieces, but this is really easy to get to, and so these 4 bolts will eventually be removed as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm gonna come back down here and remove these 2 larger bolts, but before I do so, I'm going to support this whole assembly by placing a jack stand underneath that support arm, so that when I do remove the bolts it doesn't come flopping forward on me. Alright, so this will be my setup. I have a breaker bar on the one side that's holding the bolt head, and that's a 19mm socket, and then this other side that is actually on the nut is a 21mm, so there's a little bit of difference in sizes, but that's how I'm gonna remove these. And make sure you wear hearing protection. Okay, the other thing I've done is taken this twist tie and attached it to the sway bar link in order to prevent, again, this forward moving and pressure on the CV joint and the other parts of the steering linkage. It's a little cheesy, but it actually is working pretty good. And as you see, when I move the strut lower back and forth, this isn't moving. So it should stay nice and tight, and then I can go up top and loosen my bolts from inside the engine compartment. It's always a good idea to break bolts with an actual breaker bar. I always cringe when I see people breaking bolts with a regular ratchet. You're really going to decrease the life and longevity of the gears inside that ratchet. So I always break it first, and these aren't too tough. Make sure it's nice and seated, and repeat the process for the other 4. And then when you get down to it, I would leave just this one bolt partially threaded, so that you can just finish unthreading it by hand. That way you can kind of, if you're working alone like I am, you can use one hand to hold the strut so it doesn't drop and damage anything, and then the other hand to unthread and then reach back down around with the other hand to kind of maneuver it out. By the way, this was a 14mm socket to remove these 4 bolts, or excuse me, nuts up top. And this is what I was talking about on the last one, is just kind of leaving it partially threaded so that when you go to support it with your other hand, you can finish unthreading it the rest of the way and not have too many turns to go. You should compare the 2 struts side by side before you go to replace it, just to make sure it's all gonna line up. I always remove the sticker, and it's just saying not to remove this bolt, because then the spring, which has been assembled at the factory, can come flying out at you. So don't touch the big one that's behind that sticker. And you know, just overall make sure that it looks like it's about the same, that the bolt holes are gonna line up before you take the trouble of trying to install it. The replacement strut has this extra little bracket, which we're not going to use, but that's fine. It's not going to get in the way. And then we know that we have the bracket that'll hold that brake hose. So now it's getting ready to install. It's a good idea to place some thread locker onto your studs before you install them, so that you don't have to try and mess with it when you're holding the strut in one hand and trying to thread a nut with the other hand. So I'll do it while it's laying here on the ground and just kind of work it around the threads. I'm going to use blue because after every strut or anytime you replace any component of your steering linkage, you should, or like steering components, you should get an alignment after that. This blue, you're able to remove it, or excuse me, reuse it and remove it with just hand tools. So that'll make it easier for the guys that are doing the alignment to do their job. My goodness, that'll get your heart racing. Here's the strut, kind of in a generic location. Those bolts, of course, still need to be replaced. But this is what I was talking about. I was able to hold the strut up with the one hand and thread just a little bit of 2 of the nuts. So I'll finish up tightening these and getting these started as well. And those, try to line up with your previous marks that the flanged end of the nut made, and you'll be close to your alignment. But again, you need to get an alignment job after this is done, this work is done. But anyway, tighten these to 46 foot-pounds of torque. Okay, here my torque wrench is set to 46 foot-pounds. And make sure, again, you're only using the handle. Don't touch anywhere along the shaft of the torque wrench. It's designed specifically that you only hold this handle. Sometimes you can brace just the fulcrum if you're afraid that the socket might cut off the nut or the bolt head, but always just apply the pressure at this handle. Wait for that click, go in a cross pattern. Make sure that's seated. And last one. All right, there's 46 foot-pounds for the top bolts. And now we'll come back here and get those bolts fastened. Okay, so I have the jack stand removed from underneath, and I was using my knees to support it while I lined up the bolts up here. That's why my legs are underneath the car. And then I've got these bolts inserted into the proper location and the nuts in place, and then I'll just tighten these. These bolts and nuts are tightened to 101 foot-pounds. Alright, so those are on and tightened to 101 foot-pounds. Don't forget your little clip for the brake hose. Make sure that's on and secure. Make sure you removed any supporting wires or strings or lashing straps, whatever you used, and that it's nice and clean install. Give it a good little shake. Make sure everything feels solid. Take a look at your other components. Make sure there's nothing else that's overly worn. And then let's get the wheel back on and call this a day.